Okay, let's review cognitive dissonance really quick. Another example is if you have a friend who's a jerk and he's a jerk to other people, he's not a jerk to you, you may have experienced cognitive dissonance. So what's easier to change, your behavior, break off your friendship with this person, or your beliefs? Well, maybe they're not a jerk to everybody. They're not really that bad of a guy. So you change your beliefs because it's easier to change your beliefs than your actions. Now, this is crucial with cognitive dissonance. This came up a few years ago on the AP exam on one of the free response questions. Students were just writing about the fact that cognitive dissonance is when there's a difference between your actions and your beliefs, and they weren't getting the point. And the reason they weren't getting the point is they weren't talking about the tension between actions and beliefs. I really like that example that Mr. Woodard used with the two musical notes that aren't going together. They don't sound right together. There's a dissonant sound there. Remember to always think in terms of cognitive dissonance of that tension between actions and beliefs. You can have a friend who's a jerk and you don't care. Yeah, he's a jerk. I don't care. I like hanging out with him. Okay, there's no tension there. There's no dissonance. It's when you see your friend be a jerk to other people, and you're like, wow, that is not a nice person. And so in your head, you're like, I really should not be friends with this person anymore. But that's really hard to say, I don't want to be friends with you anymore. You're a jerk. So what do? You start rationalizing. You start to ease that tension and that dissonance. And so you start saying, yeah, he's not a jerk to everybody. Those people deserve it. And that eases the cognitive dissonance. So just remember, you have to mention that tension in cognitive dissonance. It's not just a mere difference between action and beliefs. All right, take a look at these lines here real quick. Which line matches the line on the left? 1, 2, or 3? Might be kind of hard to tell on the video. 1 is the one that definitely matches. 3 is pretty close, but we know for sure 2 does not match. It's much longer than the line A on the left side. Well, what if you were in a room full of people, though, and they all picked line number 2 before you got to choose and say which line you thought was the same as line A? So we're getting into one of the more famous conformity experiments. Solomon Asch did exactly that. He put people in a room, had different lines, and some were obviously different than the line that they were comparing to. And he had actors in there, he had confederates is what they're called, giving the wrong answer to see what the subject would say. And so we typically see results like this in conformity experiments. If there's no opposition, if everybody in the room says the correct answer, then the subject will say the correct answer as well. No problem. There's no reason to doubt your own eyes, literally. If you have other people in the room and they're saying the wrong answer, but at least one other person gives the right answer, you can see here the correct responses from the subject go down just a little bit, but not a ton. Sorry, let me go back here real quick. You can see on the left side there, the correct answers, the percentage of correct answers. So no opposition is that dark blue line. You can see it's almost 100% the subject gives the correct answer. The green line, it starts to dip a little bit because other people are saying the wrong answer, but your partner, this other person, is saying the right answer. If you don't have anybody else in that room giving the right answer, you can see how low the correct answers now become from the subjects. They start to go along with the majority, even though they literally can see with their eyes that it's the wrong answer. So we'll take a few minutes here after the video and we'll go back and we'll watch the Asch experiment and that little video that talks about it. Here are some characteristics that are likely to produce conformity or that will help somebody not conform. First of all, the size of the majority. The more people that you have in the room giving the wrong answer, the easier it is to go along with them. So majority, if you have a larger group, it's easier to follow that group. That makes sense. The presence of a partner who dissented, I just talked about that on the last slide. If you have at least one other person that gives the the right answer. Everybody else is saying line number 2, and one other person says line number 1, you're more easily able to go along with that other person. And the size of the discrepancy between the correct answer and the majority position. So if line number 2 actually was another 3 inches tall, it's easier to go against that. Okay. Line number 2 is obviously the wrong answer. But if you make it really obvious that it's the wrong answer, if it's really exaggerated, then it's easier not to go along with it. Okay? Now, what causes conformity? There are a couple of big terms as far as what causes conformity. Number one, and you have to know the difference between the two. A lot of people will get these interchanged. Normative social influence is when you go along with the rest of the group in order to gain approval or to avoid disapproval. The Ash experiment is a perfect example. You're going along with the rest of the group, even though you can literally see with your own eyes that you're giving the wrong answer. But you don't want to be that person that everybody looks at and says, what are you talking about? Even though you know you're correct. Okay? The way many people will dress in high school. You go along with your group, okay, because you want to fit in with the rest of the group. Not necessarily bad or good, and the book talks about that too. Depends on the situation as far as conformity being a negative or a positive. But that's what we will tend to do with normative social influence. We go along with the group. Now, informational social influence is when you actually start to wonder who's right and who's wrong. What's the correct answer, if you will? What's the correct reality? So a great example right now is, again, Mr. Woodard's been talking about it, is this whole mask issue. And this just happened to me, actually. Informational social influence. My son was getting on an airplane. I wanted to see how safe it was to get on airplanes. And I found a research article, credible research article out of MIT. A professor out of MIT said, you know what? After running all the numbers, it does not look like getting on an airplane is very dangerous. There's like a 1 in 4,000 something chance of getting COVID on an airplane. And if you have the middle seat empty, it's like 1 in 7,000. I'm like, great. I don't even really know what 1 in 4,000 means, but it sounds really good. So now I feel better. Okay. So my information has been influenced by an expert. Problem is now more studies are coming out that are saying we don't have enough information. We can't give accurate information as to the safety of an airplane. So you have to be very discerning in where you're finding your information. We've talked about that. I'm sure you've talked about that in other classes as far as getting your sources of information from credible articles for research, etc. So now I have to be honest with myself and say, okay, I saw that one study, but are there another 5 studies from credible sources that are saying we don't have enough information? Okay, so informational social influences, you're going to accept certain influences from other people because you trust their opinions about reality. Okay, but you have to be discerning with that for obvious reasons. Okay, I've talked for about 8 minutes, so we'll leave it there.